Hi, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. Welcome to this week's edition of Kibbitzing with Kagan, brief conversations with people I find fascinating. Today's very special guest is Heather Booth, the founder and board chair of the Midwest Academy. Heather, thank you so much for taking the time to chat today.
I'm so glad to be on because I've admired you for so long and your dynamic leadership.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. But we have so much to cover and not so much time. So let's start with the fact that you were born in Mississippi and then later returned there for Freedom Summer. Why don't we start there?
Well, many of your listeners may know about Freedom Summer. That's where there were terrible crimes against poor Black people in Mississippi. And it seemed as if no one cared. And so there was an attempt by the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee to recruit Northern students to come down. And because of our ability to get publicity, have additional resources from our family connections, it was able to shine a spotlight on what was going on in Mississippi as people were just trying to register to vote.
So let's fast forward now. And there's so many people who are still having their voting rights challenged, and crazy restrictive laws that are being passed, especially in southern states. Talk about that.
Well, the big lesson that I learned from Mississippi that applies till today is that when we organize, we can change this world, but only if we do it with love at the center. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which also some refer to as SNCC,
Yes.
felt it was building a beloved community. And even though there were terrible violence during that summer, and 3 of the young volunteers, Andrew Goodman, James Chaney, and Michael Schwerner, were killed at the hands of the Klan, within a year, we had a Voting Rights Act. And now those lessons still apply. We are faced with all sorts of dangers around us and opportunities. We're really on a knife's edge. And it's a fight between an expansion of freedom, freedom to vote, reproductive freedom, the freedom to thrive, the freedom to have unions, or an authoritarian alternative with violence and even the threat of dictatorship.
I know, right?
But when we organize, we can change the world.
So I love that quote, and I saw that on your website. We are going to get to organizing, but Goodman, Schwerner, and Schwerner and Chaney. A lot of folks don't know that 2 of those 3 young men were Jewish, and 1 was African American. So Black-Jewish relations. You were raised in a liberal Jewish family. Talk about how your Jewish values inspired and framed some of your activism.
In most religions, I think morality is at its core. We try and be good people. In Judaism, as I was brought up, it's also about changing the world and making this a better world. On the holiest day of the year for Jews, on Yom Kippur, Isaiah says, it's a day of fasting. And he says, is this the fast I command of you, to sit in sackcloth and ashes, to show that you're a penitent, observant person? And he says, no, the fast I command of you is to break the bonds of wickedness and let the oppressed go free. And that's the kind of morality I try to follow.
Well, you have done that in so many ways. Let's talk about the Midwest Training Academy. I knew about that in the mid 1980s when I worked at National NARAL, then called the National Abortion Rights Action League. And that's when I first heard about you. Talk about the incredible work that the Midwest Academy does and why you founded it. You had gone to school, you were undergrad at the University of Chicago. Talk about how this whole thing came about and what sort of issues they're working on now.
In the early 1970s,
1972. Yes.
the movements were breaking apart after all the vitality of the civil rights movement. Dr. King had been killed. President Kennedy had been killed, and there was Malcolm X had been killed. There was a fear developing in the country, and organizations were breaking apart. At the same time, I had had a job and people were mistreated at my workplace, so I started a union, and I won a back pay suit,
Yes.
and I had been fired for union organizing. And with that money, I decided I'd start a training center to pass on the lessons of organizing and build the spirit, and also convey the history of how people have organized and how we can organize in these times to make change.
So do you like organizing for candidates or issues more? And what are the differences?
You know, it's interesting. When Midwest Academy started in 1973,
Two. Oh, three. Okay.
72, it started in 72. Our first class was in 73. So you're
Okay.
right. I was focused on issues and on building grassroots organizations, people talking to other people, coming together for a common purpose, focusing on who had the power to change things, and then building our base so that people could find our own voice.
Mhm.
We had, by the way, 3 principles that I think are important to share. The first was that we wanted to actually win improvements in people's lives, not just spout off the phrases of freedom and democracy, as important as that is, but to actually win improvements in people's lives. The second was to give people a sense of their own power, so they were involved in winning the change. And the
Mhm.
third was to change the relations of power and build new structures that make this a small d democratic country.
Yes.
But at that point, I had actually been not interested in elections. I felt the elections were corrupt and just funded
Mm,
by money, and they
mm.
didn't get to real people. But in 1980, when Reagan was elected, I realized, as a friend of mine, Alice Palmer, said, if you don't do elections, elections will do you.
Wow. True.
I learned a great deal about running elections, and now I switch off between elections and
And
organizing, because elections say how much power we have on election day, but we need to keep it going to build support, hold candidates accountable, and
yes,
build a popular base of power.
absolutely.
Okay.
All right. So, Heather, let's talk about some of the key policy issues, especially affecting women. Abortion rights, the Supreme Court and the Dobbs decision. What is your thought, your strategy, your hope for women's reproductive choice?
Well, this is the most intimate decision in a person's life, about when or whether or with whom we have a child, and no politician should interfere with this most personal decision. But what's happening now is politicians are substituting not only for the women involved, but substituting even for the uh, physicians. There's an attack on medical abortion, which means that judges with no medical background, there's a judge who said that the main pill, mifepristone, that
Mhm.
is used for over 50% of all abortions in the US, should not be licensed by the Food and Drug Administration. And there's a Supreme Court case coming on this. They want to outlaw birth control, and they really want to control women.
So you were a Jane. Talk about what that means. And I have to say, my tea mug today is Believe in Change. And man, Heather Booth is the personification of Believe in Change. Talk about the Janes, the documentary, and tell us just a little bit about that.
In 1965, a friend of mine said his sister was pregnant and really was not prepared to have a child. And could I do something about it? Could I find someone to perform an abortion? I had never really thought about the issue before. 1965 was a more innocent time. We barely talked about sex with anyone outside of our most intimate partners, let alone abortion. But I went to the medical arm of the civil rights movement, the Medical Committee for Human Rights, And I
Mm,
found a remarkable doctor, T.R.M. Howard. We should know his name.
mm.
And he said he would perform the procedure. I found out later he had been a civil rights leader in Mississippi who came to Chicago when his name was on a Klan death list.
Wow.
He performed the procedure, and I thought that I had done a good deed, and that was it. Everything was successful. But word spread, and
Mm.
short time later, someone else called. I made the other connection with Dr. Howard. That was successful. And then someone else called. And at that point, I realized I'd better set up a system. There was a greater need than I had understood. And over time, I recruited others into the system. And because it was illegal in Illinois for 3 people to even talk about planning for an abortion,
Mm.
it was a conspiracy to commit a felony.
Mm.
I decided we shouldn't say call Heather or call anyone with a particular phone number. We should say call Jane.
And that was a reference to Jane Doe.
Well, it was a reference to the Janes of America, the
Okay.
every women of America.
Right. Right.
And over time, I recruited other women into the system and into Jane.
Mm.
And between 1965, when I got that first request, and 1973, when Roe became the law of the land,
Roe versus Wade, the Supreme Court decision that legalized abortion in America.
the women of Jane themselves learned how and performed 11,000 abortions successfully and helped many women in their lives.
Unbelievable. Let's
And there,
pivot to another.
there's now two movies and plays and books about Jane. And there's a wonderful movie that got 3 Emmys called The Janes. That's a
Yes.
documentary.
And it's available, I think it was through Supermax or something.
It's through HBO.
HBO. So let's pivot to the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment. Is there any chance? In Maryland, it's coming up again, and we're reaffirming our commitment. Virginia passed it under the leadership of my friend, former Speaker Eileen Filler-Corn. How do you see the landscape for the Equal Rights Amendment?
I think that what we will need is we will need a Democratic trifecta, a president, a Senate, a House, as well as state houses that support women's most intimate freedoms and believe there should be real equality, that we should fulfill the original mission of this country with freedom and justice for all.
Oh, amen. Uh, let's talk about voting rights. What is the most effective argument? Are you able, either through the Midwest Academy or have you seen other groups providing effective change leadership to win people's voting rights back?
Well, where we've organized intensively, we've won. And we've expanded voting rights in a number of states. In Maryland, in Illinois, in Massachusetts, in California. And the question is, can we do it around the country?
Yes. In the South, where you can't be given, a glass of water. Right? That's right. Union organizing has been an important mission, and you referenced it a little earlier. Unions seem to be on the return, on the upswing. Why do you think that is, and what's the effective message that allows more organizing around the country?
Well, just to say what the challenges are that are faced, the extreme right wing, the MAGA right, the MAGA Republicans understood that if they can undermine unions, they undermine the powerful force of working people coming together to have a voice and to have legal power to bargain not only for wages, hours, and working conditions, but to build political power to express our voice in the society. And so they went after the unions. They've tried to destroy them for 50 years or more, probably even longer.
Sure.
And so we need political power as well as organized power at a work site. But there has been a revival. And whether it's the United Auto Workers who've just won extraordinary contracts, or the Teamsters, or the workers at Starbucks, and we want to
Starbucks.
support them.
Yeah.
And that organizing goes on. And what we say is, we want solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong.
There you go. Great song. And I'm sure everyone watching this knows what a MAGA Republican is, but that's a Trump person, Make America Great Again, even though we are already great. Talk about when I think about Heather Booth, one of the things I think about is your mentoring of young women. Tell me how you choose your proteges and what you think is the biggest gift that you can offer a young woman who's starting in her career.
I think one of the most important things is that people realize how wonderful they are.
Mm,
Often the society tells us you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not tall enough, you're not thin enough, you're not enough.
mm.
But in fact, we are enough. It doesn't mean we know everything. In fact, I acknowledge there's so many things I keep learning. I learned from you, and we learned from each other. But together, we can build something even better. We just need to try and support each other, as I say, with love at the center.
So consumer protection, you worked with dynamic, effective women, and they with you, with women like Jan Schakowsky, Congresswoman from Illinois, and U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren. You helped create the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Talk about what you think made the difference.
Well, I was asked to direct the fight for financial reform, that after the massive fraud by the largest banks and housing companies and the near collapse of the US economy, we brought people together and we built group upon group. We came to trust each other, and we used our collective power to move and influence those members of the House and the Senate, so that our power was even stronger than that of the big banks. And we won financial reform that's a down payment on the greater reform we still need. There's still further to go. But when we organize, we have changed this world. And if we organize now, we will change this world.
It's amazing. So many questions. I've worked on a lot of consumer protection issues, and I think they're hard because the proponents aren't as strong and organized generally, and the opponents, the industry folks, are more well-funded and frankly louder. But let's move on. So we're all getting older. Talk about, yes, exactly. I got mine too. Pointing to our gray hairs and stuff. Talk about the advantages and disadvantages of being an aging leader and an icon. What is that? What does that free you up to do, and what are some challenges?
But really, I'm just like all your listeners. I'm an everyday person. I wake up, I have my fears, I have my concerns, I have my loves. I try to find joy in life. But I do try. We move forward when we try and do the work every day. And what I find is, with aging, there's the joy of seeing a new generation that's coming into its own, and it has increasing power. And I'm glad to be a partner, shoulder to shoulder, passing on what I know and learning from the new generation. The number of
Yes.
things I have to learn, it seems to grow every day. And also have some insights that I can also share. And with
What
aging may come aches and pains, but also even deepening friendships and awareness.
That's fantastic. Heather, what advice would you give to your younger self?
I think I might have said to have greater confidence in myself. I think young people often, even when we act boldly, we may feel inside, we just don't know enough, we're just not good enough,
Mm,
and to have confidence. And with that, we can make this a better world.
love that. Before we shift to our fast five, I want to just give you a moment to talk about your beloved late husband, Paul, who was a partner in so many things, and your sons. So can you talk about your family and what work you've done together and what they're up to?
Here, I want to show you, here's a picture of 5 of my grandchildren.
Oh, I love that. That's great.
There's a little bit of a glare, so I don't know if you can see it.
There
And
is.
they're older now, but they are a
Yeah,
joy in my life. I have 2 grown sons. One is a lawyer, and one is a public school teacher,
nice.
and 5 remarkable grandkids who each have their own unique and vital personalities.
Hmm.
And it really is part of the joy of life, of seeing this next generation coming into its own.
And Paul?
I met my husband at a sit-in. He was the leader of the student movement and a leader of the anti-war movement against the war in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
I was at the University of Chicago. We had a sit-in in an administration building and invited him in as an outside speaker. We sat next to each other, got to know each other.
Aw.
In 5 days, he asked me to marry him, and I said yes.
What?
And we were married for over 50 years.
Wow.
And he passed away 7 years ago.
Yes, I can't
I
believe,
miss him every day
of course.
and feel I'm carrying on the values that he also believed in.
Yes. Well, he was a special man, and you guys were an amazing couple. I'm so sorry. So, Heather Booth, I have 5 quick questions, 5 quick answers before we wrap up. Question number 1. Who are a couple of your sheroes in this Women's History Month?
You know, there's so many. Cheryl Kagan, you are a shero. And many of the people listening, you are sheroes. There really are so many. Fannie Lou Hamer was a great influence on me, a great heroine from Mississippi in the Freedom Summer Project.
Mhm.
Gloria Steinem is a current
Mhm.
shero. I
Mhm.
just was at a birthday party with her. But also Satchel Tsai, who was my 19-year-old assistant in 2020 when I was in the when I had worked in the Biden for President campaign.
Nice.
She took a time off from college to be my assistant. So it doesn't matter what age, it doesn't matter what background. We can be heroes for each other. By the way, hero in the myth was a woman.
Nice. I did not know that, but we don't have time to do that now. Question number 2, quick questions, quick answers. What is your favorite cuisine and where do you like enjoying it in this area, in the DMV?
You know, my favorite cuisine is when I'm eating with friends or family. And I really have no deep preference
Okay.
about where I'm eating, as long as it's with whom I'm
I,
eating.
I love that. Question number 3. If you could travel anywhere in the world and money were no object, where would you want to go?
Again, I'd mostly want to go with people that I really love. When we were young, my husband and I didn't have any money, and the furthest we went was whatever a car ride could take us. But
Yes.
as we grew older, we decided to travel a great deal. And we've been on some amazing trips:
Mm.
Antarctica, the Galapagos,
Wow.
and also visiting my grandkids in Massachusetts and in Illinois.
That's great. Question number 4. What are you reading right now that is inspiring you?
Um, I just read a book called A Paragon. I believe it's spelled Aperigon. It's an object that has an infinite number of countable sides. It's an impossible
Hmm.
concept. And it's the story of an Israeli father and a Palestinian father, both of whom lost young daughters to violence
Mm,
in Israel and Palestine. And
mm,
it's their story told over and over and over again in nearly infinite number of ways.
wow,
Understand our shared humanity.
nice. Heather Booth, founder and board chair of the Midwest Academy. Question number 5, the question I ask everybody. What is your hidden secret superpower? What is a skill or talent you have, something you're really good at that most folks can't do?
You know, a superpower others can also do. I believe having love at the center and committing to doing the work to making this a better world. It's one of the things you do. It's one of the things your listeners do. I hope you'll join me, that you'll engage in this election that's upcoming, in the organizations in your community, and in making this a better world.
Absolutely. Well, Heather, such a joy. For those viewers or listeners, we had some tech challenges, so I'm so thrilled to have been able to finally get this going. Heather, thank you for your time. Thank you for your career of activism and effectiveness. You're remarkable and one of my sheroes. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing you again before too long.
I'm so glad to be your movement partner. All the
Yay.
best to you. Thank you, Cheryl.
Stay well.